For wrestling fans, the biggest story these days is unquestionably the rise of the new promotion All Elite Wrestling. AEW has exploded out of nowhere and seems intent on giving the WWE a run for its money. Here's a look at the story behind AEW. It's impossible to talk about AEW without focusing on Cody Rhodes. Along with Kenny Omega and the tag team The Young Bucks, Nick Jackson and Matt Jackson, he's the face of the company. He's also carrying on the legacy of the man who is arguably the single most important creative force in wrestling history, his father, the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes. In front of the camera, Dusty was a three-time National Wrestling Alliance World Heavyweight Champion, the beloved son of a plumber who gave the world a strong contender for the greatest promo of all time, the Hard Times promo. Behind the camera, Dusty spent years working as a booker. He was instrumental in moving pro wrestling to the modern format built around massive supercard shows, and scripted some of the NWA's greatest stories, many of which revolved around him. Rhodes was beloved by fans, and as ESPN's Brian Campbell put it, quote, never afraid to endure an incredible scripted beating to get his opponents over as the villains. That tendency would even lead to him being fired in 1988, when a staged attack from the Road Warriors left him a bloody mess when bleeding was forbidden by the network at the time. Cody literally spent his entire life around one of the masters of the art form, watching him work and clearly learning a lot.
If not us, who? And if not now, when?
For most people today, wrestling is World Wrestling Entertainment. That's not to say it's the only wrestling going on. Independent wrestling is in the middle of a pretty incredible renaissance. Streaming services have made it easier than ever to keep up with events that would otherwise be local, and have enabled American audiences to follow international promotions such as New Japan Pro Wrestling more easily than ever. But in the broad TV landscape, WWE is essentially the only game in town, and it's been that way for almost 20 years. With the demise of WCW and ECW, both of which were bought by WWE in the early 2000s, WWE has been the only wrestling promotion with a mainstream television presence. There's Impact Wrestling, but with some shaky creative decisions, business practices like not actually signing a top star to a contract, and moves to increasingly obscure networks, they've never been within shouting distance of dethroning WWE. Yet being a monopoly isn't all it's cracked up to be. WWE once thrived on competition. The hottest period in pro wrestling history came when the then WWF was directly competing with WCW for viewers in the so-called Monday Night War. While that was ultimately unsustainable, it's a feeling WWE has tried to recreate over the years by splitting its own roster into brands. WWE is in a weird place when it comes to its business practices. It's a publicly traded company and the target of an incredible amount of scrutiny, with highly publicized stories of outrage about doing business with the government of Saudi Arabia after the killing of journalist Jamal Khashoggi, or how superstars don't get health benefits from WWE chairman Vince McMahon.
The extent to which he's denied any responsibility for their welfare is astonishing.
But they have no real reason to change, since they're basically the only globally recognized wrestling promotion. And even if you don't like WWE's practices, there hasn't been a real viable alternative for mainstream American pro wrestling. WWE also has an embarrassment of riches when it comes to talent, with a massive roster of incredible performers. But there's only so much screen time to go around. WWE has signed plenty of wrestlers that could be huge stars that there quite simply isn't room for. And even when the shows themselves are good, as WWE's shows frequently are, stagnation can take its toll. That's why people on all sides of the industry are very interested in finding a viable, profitable alternative. While AEW has some faces familiar to WWE fans, AEW's real origins stem from something that many casual fans never saw: New Japan Pro Wrestling's Bullet Club faction. The Bullet Club was formed in 2013, and it was built primarily around Prince Devitt, known today in WWE as Finn Balor, along with Carl Anderson, Tama Tonga, and Bad Luck Fale. It would expand to include the Young Bucks, AJ Styles, and Luke Gallows. At its height, the club had the comedic irreverence of D-Generation X, the monochromatic color scheme and invasion storyline of the NWO, and the championship dominance of the Four Horsemen. Plus, they cheated a lot. As members signed WWE contracts, other wrestlers cycled through, including Kenny Omega, Hangman Page, and Cody Rhodes, three names that might sound pretty familiar if you've been keeping up with AEW. AEW maybe wouldn't be happening at all if it weren't for a YouTube series of all things. In 2016, after splitting off from the Bullet Club in a sub-faction called the Elite, Cody Omega and the Bucks launched a YouTube series called Being the Elite. Originally designed as a sort of behind-the-scenes road diary series following the group on their travels, BTE eventually became much more. Storylines were fleshed out through the series, and it has included major announcements about events.
See, 49 minutes. We're
Well,
at
it's sold out in
49
30 minutes.
Being the Elite blurred the line between pro wrestling storytelling and the reality behind it, and built a tight continuity over which the Elite themselves had complete control, separate from any of the various promotions they were wrestling for. It allowed them to take advantage of the platform to reach an audience that was maybe not interested in following Ring of Honor or New Japan, but were definitely drawn by charismatic performers like the Young Bucks doing silly things like having a living room feud with Santa Claus. They forged a connection with diehard fans that made the entire group even more popular than they already were. The popularity of the Young Bucks is pretty indisputable. Along with Elite stablemate Kenny Omega, they're one of the few acts in wrestling so popular that they've turned down multiple offers from WWE because they can make more money and retain much more creative control working outside the world's most dominant wrestling promotion. In 2017, that prompted a question posed on Twitter to Dave Meltzer, longtime wrestling journalist and commentator, about whether Ring of Honor, a company that predominantly featured Omega, the Bucks, and Cody, was popular enough to sell out a 10,000-seat arena. Meltzer's response was a short, not anytime soon. This is one of those instances of someone deciding to do something entirely because they were told they couldn't do it. Sure enough, Cody announced that the Elite were going to promote a supercard, putting up their own money to prove that they could, in fact, put 10,000 butts in 10,000 seats based entirely on their own merit. The result was appropriately called All In, a risky venture that many fans felt had the potential to change wrestling by showing that large-scale success was possible outside WWE. Tickets went on sale on May 13, 2018, and despite the show only having one match announced at the time, they sold out in half an hour. For his part, Meltzer said he was happy to have been proven wrong. All In was a big deal. With its 30-minute sellout, it became the first non-WCW, non-WWE wrestling show in the US in 25 years to sell more than 10,000 tickets. And by the time those fans were crowded into Chicago's Sears Center or streaming the show at home, it had turned into an international showcase. Not only did it feature ROH talent, the Elite also brought in talent from Mexico's CMLL and AAA promotions, Impact Wrestling, New Japan, and the National Wrestling Alliance. It even had a match with TV's Green Arrow, Stephen Amell. While virtually all the matches were well received by fans and critics, the NWA World Championship match might end up being the most important in the long run. In addition to winning the championship that had defined much of his father's career, Cody sported a pair of boots with 605 emblazoned on them. For viewers who grew up watching World Championship Wrestling, the meaning was clear. WCW Saturday Night, the show that Dusty Rhodes always referred to as the Mothership, aired for years at 6:05 p.m. on TBS. It was a notable tribute to Dusty, and also a perhaps unintentional bit of foreshadowing. On New Year's Day 2019, the Elite announced on Being the Elite not just that they'd be running a second show called Double or Nothing at the MGM Grand Arena in Las Vegas, but the formation of a new promotion, All Elite Wrestling. In the days that followed, Cody and the Young Bucks were officially named executive vice presidents and presumably bookers for AEW. AEW announced that they'd signed a roster that included up-and-coming stars as well as established legends like Chris Jericho. More importantly, however, was the fact that they had the financial backing of Shahid and Tony Khan, father and son billionaires who also own the Jacksonville Jaguars, with Tony serving as president. Maybe they were inspired by the impending return of the XFL to compete with WWE chairman Vince McMahon on two fronts. The formation of a new wrestling promotion, even one featuring popular stars like Cody, Kenny, Omega, and the Young Bucks, isn't exactly huge news. Having financial backing that can afford top talent is a bigger deal, but if AEW really wanted to compete with or even provide an alternative to WWE, they needed one specific thing: a deal with a mainstream television network. Online streaming is great, but TV offers access to a more casual audience, which is what a company truly needs to thrive. And that's exactly what AEW got, in a place that's both surprising and completely appropriate. On May 15th, TNT announced that they'd be airing a weekly AEW show in fall 2019. It's notable for a couple of reasons. TNT is a major cable network that's available worldwide, and it has a history with wrestling. TNT was the home of WCW Monday Nitro until WCW folded in 2001, and was where that company had their greatest success. The announcement included a couple of relatively subtle nods to the network's wrestling pedigree, including a fiery background for the AEW logo that mimicked Monday Nitro. There was an even deeper cut in the form of a tweet that read, "We're back in the wrestling business." That's a reference to a phone call Ted Turner made to Vince McMahon after Turner bought WCW, telling McMahon he had entered the wrestling business. McMahon famously replied, quote, "I'm in the entertainment business." But with an emphasis on entertainment that's led to things like running a full trailer for The Secret Life of Pets 2 during a Raw match in split screen, fans might just be looking for a little more wrestling. Only time will tell what the future holds for AEW, but with name recognition, financial backing, a TV deal, and experienced stars at the helm, it certainly seems like they're poised for success. The question of what they're going to do differently than other companies, including WWE, remains, but we have an interesting example of how they might do business. One of the matches set for Double or Nothing was Hangman Page versus Pac, but the match was pulled from the card. Rather than just not having the match, however, Pac faced Page 7 days before Double or Nothing on another show, with the entire match made available for free on AEW's YouTube channel. Whether this was a legitimate problem or just a story to generate buzz and get more eyes on AEW, the fact remains that it was dealt with in a way that a traditional promotion like WWE simply could not do, and it showed a willingness to deliver for the fans. That's a very different approach than what we've seen before, and might just be the first step in AEW being something very different for the future of pro wrestling.
WWE is wonderful, but they do not own pro wrestling. All of them!
Check out one of our newest videos right here. Plus, even more grunge videos about your favorite stuff are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.